I really enjoy how this podcast is developing. I know we are only a few episodes in, and you can definitely tell we are still learning. But already with our first episodes, I think we have shown how diverse this hobby is and how people can be active in different parts of this branch. Hannes, the guest that is joining us today, is a great example of that because he is more focused on invertebrates. And invertebrates are a group of animals that is often included in herpetofauna without much thought, but it's actually a group which certainly holds its separate challenges and approaches. Welcome everybody to another episode of the European Herpetoculture Podcast. My name is Stefan. Today my co-host is Ben. Welcome, Ben. Hello, sir. And we have another guest, and this time it's Hannes DerSpinner on Instagram. Welcome, Hannes.
Hey.
Hello. It's so good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. And as I mentioned before, for hyping up the whole project since the start. It was really cool.
Yeah, no problem. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Wunderbar, that's my favorite German word. So thank you so much for joining us. And we have a lot of topics we wanted to talk to you about. But of course, as with every other episode, I think it's a nice way to get started with the audience, getting to know you a little bit better, your history in the hobby. So Ben and I are very curious about your start, how it all started for you, and how you get to end up where you are now.
Yeah, okay. I think as with every other person that's been on this podcast or in the American ones, I was always really, really interested in animals, and especially in reptiles and amphibians from a really early age. And I always wanted to keep something exotic, especially lizards. Lizards were the holy grail for me, because in the area where I live in Germany, if you were lucky, you get to see an Podacus moralis, a wall lizard, maybe, or a smooth worm, the anguilles. And lizards were always kind of rare, and maybe because of that attracted me. And I always wanted to have some kind of this exotic magic at home. And I begged my parents for leopard geckos a really long time. And then in second grade, I finally got my first leopard geckos. And when you go to reptile expos or to pet shops to get feeders, you start to see other animals in the enclosures or for sale. And I started to get into phasmids because they are really easy to keep and to breed for a kid in primary school. And after some breeding successes with different phasmid species, I started to get some mantids, some beetle species, and some of the cheaper insect species that were not too hard to keep or to breed. And I really had fun with doing that. And at that time, when I was in fourth grade, I think it was 10 or something like that, there was a new magazine on the hobby market. It was called Bugs, and it was just about invertebrates and how to keep and breed them. It's similar like the Reptilia. I don't know if you know it, but it's the German magazine. And this magazine was really cool and inspired me to do more research and to look in other orders of invertebrates more deeply. And the last I don't know how to say it, the word the last episode of this magazine was about centipedes. And after that, it vanished from the market because so little people bought it, unfortunately. But the last episode was about centipedes, and then I begged my mom to get a centipede, and I lied to her and said, yeah, it's not venomous and it's not dangerous. And that was my first more advanced invertebrate pet. And after that, I thought, you can't be a real exotic keeper if you never had a tarantula. And then the whole arachnid and spider thing started rolling, and I got into tarantulas, and after that into true spiders, and then into the scorpions. And now I'm here. That maybe sounds like I would just get animals and keep them and then sell them and get another one. But with many inverts, they just live like 2 or 3 years. Exception for tarantulas and some scorpions, of course. But yeah, for example, the most of the spiders I was working with, their whole life cycle was between 1.5 and 3 years. So you could go from egg to adult spider in like 1.5 year.
So
And
that's true spiders or it's tarantulas?
yeah, true spiders is a really big order. It's order is not the correct taxonomic word, but you can divide spiders into mygalomorph spiders and true spiders. Mygalomorph spiders, they are chelicera, their fangs, they work like this, so parallel. And these are tarantulas, trapdoor spiders, funnel web spiders. I don't know how to explain it, but when you see them, you know it. And true spiders is basically everything else. So that's the big majority of spiders. And the ones I kept, or the families I specialized in, they were all like these 2 to 3 year old life cycles.
Yeah. That's the thing about keeping invertebrates, right? The short life expectancy and also the fact that they don't require a lot of space. So that makes them quite suitable for building a kind of a collection. You don't
Yes,
really
that's
specialize in just one species or one genus most of the time, I guess. You can
that's
really have a diverse collection, yeah.
the difficult thing, to not go into this Pokemon type of collection. Gotta
Yeah.
catch them all. Yeah, I had my points in this journey where I was like this and just bought every new species on the import list. If it was a huntsman spider, so belonging to the family Sparacidae, and it was new in the hobby, I just bought it. Doesn't matter what it was, I just wanted it and want to breed it. Worked out often, but not always. Yeah, that's the danger. You can easily stack the plastic boxes on top of each other, and many species I worked with were not like these huge tarantulas. They were just like this big or so, and yeah, it's really easy to get overwhelmed when you have such a big collection and breed too, and then you have to feed the babies and everything. So yeah, now I'm just keeping for fun, not for breeding anymore.
I'm wondering what's the true struggle about keeping a lot of inverts? If you could say you can stack the boxes up high as you want to, um, what is the challenge after all? Is it the day-to-day care, or is it the fact that once you are breeding, you've got such a huge amount of babies, or the fact that you are just not able to specialize as much for the animals that you're actually keeping, but you're just keeping them for the look. So what do you think? What's the struggle about keeping a huge inverted collection?
It's a bit of all combined. So I can only speak for arachnids here with the big collections. I never had like big collections of beetles or isopods, just a few. But with spiders, or especially with the true spiders I had, it's the care for the babies, because you can't keep them in a group all the time. It's beneficial if you keep them in a group first after they hatch, and let them cannibalize a bit, so the weak ones get eaten by the siblings and they grow a bit faster. But after a few weeks, you have to separate them, and even if it's a small egg for the genus Heteropoda, for example, even the small eggs are like 200 to 300 babies in it. And if you may know these little plastic cartridges where these ones, yeah, film boxes, if you translate formally from German. And if you have like 300 or 500 of those and have to put a fruit fly in twice a week and water it, but not too much and not too less, yeah, just a few dabs, and I really had back aches, or my back started to hurt, because every week I spent hours on my carpet sitting like this and feeding and feeding and feeding. And yeah, that's just pretty time intensive. I think it's also really fun because that's one of the things I like the most in the hobby. When you one morning check the boxes or the terrarium and there's a mom spider sitting on a new egg, or the scorpion mother with freshly born babies on her back, that's just beautiful to see. But if it's too much in a too short time period, it's just overwhelming, and you think, okay, I can just feed them tomorrow, I can just clean them tomorrow, and then half of the whole egg sac drop dead because you thought they could go without water for one more day, but they couldn't. And yeah, that's not nice for you and not nice for the animals. And there was another. Do you remember your question? You had the second part in this question, and I had an answer for this, but I forgot it right now.
What makes it overwhelming keeping a huge collection?
Yes. Yes, I know. Because when you
Perfect.
have a large collection, and I already spoke about that with Flo in the latest podcast episode of my podcast, but many people just have one or two shelves with all their spiders, and if they get a new spider, they maybe treat it different in kinds of humidity, or maybe if the spider is lucky, temperature. But in the arachnid hobby, many people don't care about the habitat really. They just keep all their tarantula species kind of the same. Some more humid, some more arid, but basically it's always the same kind of setup. And I think that's
Cocoa fiber,
yeah,
a
yes.
cork bark.
Yes. I did that too when I started, but quickly realized it's way more fun if you set up some cool enclosures. I mean, if you have like 20 individuals of one species, of course, not everyone has to be kept in a really nice terrarium, but it's way cooler to observe a spider hunting in a planted terrarium than, yeah, just in a box with corkbark. So
That is something that I wanted to get into really quick. Just also for the listeners, Hannes, you're not here without a reason. You're not only very kind of an expert in arachnids, I want to say, but also we really connected over the fact that you're into coming into the plant hobby too, I feel like, and also you're interested in, building the habitats and making something look really beautiful. That's what you can see on your Instagram too. So I'm just wondering, besides the fact that you are going for a professional route in the hobby, you can say, and that's something that I would like to speak to you later. I'm wondering, why are you actually doing all of this? It to me it sounds like a huge struggle to go through hundreds of baby slings, baby spiders, and keeping up with the breeding just to keep your collection going. And what is the reason? Why are you in the hobby? Why are you doing what you're doing?
that's a hard question. I would simply say the joy of life, because I don't. That's maybe sounds a bit cringe, like the Jurassic Park quote, but life always finds a way, and there are so many ways of evolution, and it's so cool when you have an animal at home and you know what it does from reading books or watching documentaries or videos, and then you see what you knew that animal's behavior is. You see that in real life, and you maybe read, okay, they build XX like this or that, and then you just see it one morning, and it's a feeling I can't describe. It's I don't know. It's so cool when you see the babies hatch. It's just, yeah, evolution did its thing. Not evolution. I paired them, but you can.
Playing God a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds a bit cruel, but yes, that's. Yeah, I can't really explain it. It's just
Just
the
one
fact.
question.
Yeah.
Keeping spiders without breeding them, would that be interesting to you, or do you want to
Uh,
go through all
I
of the life
I
cycle?
do it with some spiders. I don't have so much spiders anymore because we can talk about that later if you want. But I shifted more into scorpions, and really specialized on one subfamily or a particular region. Um, but I still keep some spiders I like, and I don't plan to breed them. Maybe I will try it if there will be some males and females. I don't know yet. They are not all adult yet. For example, I have some some Fufius, Lanicios, or Oiagros, some Megalomorph non-tarantulas, but small spiders that do cool webbings. And if there's going to be a pair among them, I will maybe try to breed one female or so just for fun, but I'm not really planning on it. It's also cool when you just keep them and can observe them and feed them. And I think it gives you maybe more than just have them in a breeding setup and try to just get more of them to sell them or something like that. It's more fun when you keep them. And sometimes I think back when I was younger and when I got a new species, I usually just bought one animal and really enjoyed it and put everything in this one animal. And now, after all these years, I have this kind of mindset. If I want to keep a new species, I don't get just one. You need something to build in breeding stock. So I just it's not reasonable to buy one spider or two or five if you want to start breeding them. You have to buy 10 or 20, depending on the species, of course. But if you want to raise them from slings, you always buy them in a group. And sometimes I kind of think I didn't acknowledge it so much back in the day when I just got this one animal for the sake of this species and watch it and observe it all day, if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely true. So was that something that you were also interested in when you got the centipede? Because Stefan, I know that you used to keep centipedes, I think, but I'm not sure what's the situation now.
I still have one.
Oh, you
or
still have
just
one?
because they are so incredibly cool, and I actually could buy captive bred, so not wild caught,
Okay.
and I raised it until now. But it's not like I'm working with them, but I think they're just such amazing, incredible animals. So it's more like and they scare the hell out of me. So that also makes it fun.
Do you keep them for the thrill then?
No,
Is it
not for the
like
thrill,
just
but
for
they're
a shot of
just so
adrenaline?
incredibly fast and agile and unpredictable in their movements if they get startled. And yeah, they're so incredibly cool. Yeah, I just love them.
What species do you keep?
The subspinipes, the Malaysian red one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I only had one of them once. I never really bred centipedes. I had some white-called females that dropped eggs, and sometimes the eggs were fertile and babies hatched, but it's not always so easy with raising them. But yeah, centipedes are pretty cool, and I kind of do the same thing now. I just have one centipede left, so to say, and it's an undescribed species from South America. I think it might be Scolopendra robusta, but I bought it when it was like 3 centimeters, and now after it was hidden for 5 months under its burrow, I keep it in a relatively big enclosure for invertebrate measurements. And it was hidden for 5 months, and yesterday I finally saw it again, and now it's like, I think 18 centimeters or so. And
What the fuck?
Yeah. No, I still saw the stages in between, so it didn't went from 3 to 18, but
Yeah, but within quite a short period of time.
yes,
That's
and this is the species, or belongs to the kind of size range of centipedes that were filmed by BBC in Ecuador, where they hang in the cave and start to catch bats when they fly outside.
that's fucking insane.
That's so cool.
I've never seen that.
You
Definitely.
should go ahead, Hannes.
Definitely a top predator for invertebrates. They are massive.
Yeah, they are
Eating
incredible.
bats.
I think it would be cool to breed them one day, but as you just said about the spiders, I think keeping invertebrates, if I think about keeping invertebrates in general, especially arachnids, I have this certain like picture in my head of how it mostly looks, and you described it yourself a little bit. Just 2 or 3 shells, everything the same temperature, hopefully a light, and often it's not even, and it all looks the same. And it sounds to me that you're slowly getting aware of that, and you maybe want to move a little bit away from that. Is that true? Because you're also getting into the plants.
Yeah, I really agree to that opinion that it's high likely I would say in maybe 90% that's the case. That's what the breeder setup looks like. I have a bit of a difficult to explain situation because I'm really focused on Euscorpiine. That is a scorpion subfamily from the south of Europe, or actually sometimes a bit wider north. And those scorpions, they don't really do well with tropical plants, I would say, because they live in like forests that we have in. Yeah, I think you found them in Switzerland with Ben together, or
Yeah, we did.
Italicus. Yeah, they live in kind of this alpine setup, or some other species. They just live in really rocky,
Dry,
cliffy,
bushy areas.
yeah, dry, bushy areas, and they don't really do well with plants. And the plants and the grasses from their regions, they don't do really well in terrariums. At least what I tried yet, and they are also really small. Most of the species are just like 2 centimeters. The really, really big species are 5 centimeters in total. So yeah, the best method with raising and keeping them over the years is just really in the small species in the cricket boxes, and the bigger species in small terrariums or bigger plastic boxes. And they don't really mix really good with my plant excitement. But I have some reptiles too. I have the normal morning gecko, the Lepidodactylus lugubris. I have a group of them, and I have the Hemiphilodactylus typus, and those 2 species are tropical. I know not the most exciting gecko species, just small brown ones and really common ones, but I really like them and really like to observe them. And yeah, it started because I wanted to plant the tanks, and I didn't want to use just photos or some bromeliads, and I started looking into more the taxonomy of the plants and what species, what genera are out there. And I think last year I met the greenhouse boys for the first time. I think Flo and
in Hamm, right?
Yes, in Hamm. I had contact with Flo before because when he was on Project Herpetoculture, I wrote him and said, "Oh, finally a German guy on here representing the European scene." And then we got in contact. But yeah, that's how I got more into plants. And also my girlfriend, she's more into plants than I am, and she influenced me on that too. But yeah, the tropical gecko species, and yeah, I just wanted to something to tropical to look at during the winter months here. So yeah, because of that, I shifted more into the planted and habitat style. Not because of that in the habitat style tanks, but more to the planted type of tanks. And with all my European scorpions, and when I had Scolopendra cingulata or the European spiders, like some Erice species or Lycosa, I mainly use the type of how do we say it? The type of decoration, or the it's not the right word. Sorry. The process that, for example, Phil uses for his Euromastics. I just took stone plates and big stones from outside and slates or clay pot sherds and stacked them on a pile because that was how I found some of the species in nature. Or friends from Greece sent me pictures, and they found them in their backyard under clay pots and something like that. And so I'm more into, with the scorpions, I'm more into mimicking their habitats. Yeah, they need these tiny cracks to slit in, and they don't care if there's a plant in the enclosure or if there's no plant.
I'm just wondering if you could, if you wanted to, build one beautiful display setup for the Euscorpius, you know? And my idea about it, first of all, I would like to ask the questions: do they really burrow? Do they burrow in the soil, or do they just hide in cracks?
No, Euscorpius don't burrow. Sometimes the females before they lay they don't lay eggs. Before they give birth, they do a small we call it Mulde in German.
Yeah, groove. Dent.
Yes, a small dance, because they need to be a bit more under the stone, so
Have a little
the
bit of
babies on their
space.
back have space. Yeah,
Yeah.
but Euscorpius they don't burrow.
All right.
Some
Yes.
other scorpions do, but Euscorpius don't.
So what do you think about like an aquarium setup, maybe 50 by 30 by 30 centimeters? And I'm a huge fan of these double bottoms, this extra layer, so you can have some water storage below. So imagine having like 5 centimeters of space in the bottom, fill it up with water, and then you have a separation layer, and on top you've got substrate, but a lot. I'm talking about 15 centimeters plus. Yeah. And on top of the substrate, you can put some stones, but other areas can be just free, so the moisture can more easily evaporate. And that way, if you put some plants, and I'm thinking about some succulents or maybe grasses that are also native to the regions, and I'm sure you could, if you wanted to, bring some, or no, find some plants from South Europe in the garden center. And then the plants can grow some roots right into the moist soil in the bottom or even into the water. I'm not sure. So I was wondering if the plants can then send some roots down into the moist soil or even into the water and draw the water that way. But on top, due to the fact that the substrate is so huge, the substrate layer, on top the substrate can be pretty dry. And under the stones, you have these areas where the moisture collects. Because when we were in Switzerland, Stefan and me, a couple of weeks ago, we found the Euscorpius always under stones, which were a little bit moist, never under stones that were completely dry. Can you remember, Stefan?
Yeah, I remember. It
Yeah.
was none of the stones were directly in the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they like it really shady.
Yeah.
yeah.
For example, when you look for them in Greece, or for example, especially on Crete, there's Euscorpius candiota. When I first flew there, I think 2 years ago, I always had this setup in mind, like they were under every stone or in the more sunny areas and so. But Euscorpius really live in forests. They're really not, of course, not all of the time. There are some species that are more specialized, but most of the time they really need the humidity and they search for it. They near stone walls, near caves, always where it's kind of dark and shady.
Sounds to me like it's compatible, so maybe we should try to do something.
Yeah, could be cool. There are in fact other species like Euscorpius tegustinus, and Mario was in Croatia some weeks ago, and he sent me pictures, and the tegustinus he found, they were just in these open karst fields, full sun, just dry grass and really dry areas. And there are some species like that are more in such and such areas. But as with every taxa, there are specialized or more generalist species.
Yeah. I can definitely imagine for one or two show tanks, that's something you could definitely try out. But I think also the style, like what Phil uses for his animals, I think it's sometimes good to remember that you don't need a naturalistic setup for the animal to behave in a naturalistic way.
Yes.
And I think his setups are a great example of that, and the way you are approaching your care with your scorpions, of course, looked a little bit into what you are doing. I wonder, we talked about the spiders and the amount of young they get, and now you're working more, I believe, with the Euscorpius. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I wondered, is the reason you went to the scorpions more of a natural evolution, just another group you were interested in and wanted to try, or was it also because I believe scorpions, their nests are not as big. They carry
Live
the
longer.
young for a little bit until they have a few sheds. So is that also one of the reasons you went to Euscorpius, or what was the reason for you to pick this incredibly small but also interesting genus?
Yeah, mix of both. So of course you're right. That's exactly one of the reasons, because they only drop their clutch once a year, sometimes twice in extreme situations. It's funny because I'm really focused on this subfamily, and I always try to do the best and do the research and stuff. And there's one friend of mine who is not into scorpions at all, more into tarantulas, and yeah, he had two situations where females just gave birth twice a year. I don't know what I did wrong, but yeah, nevertheless, they give birth once a year, and usually the clutch sizes are with Oiscorpiinae from 15 to 25 babies. That's not so much. There are extreme cases with like over 40, and there are some cases where it's just 1, 2, 3. Some of the, if something went wrong or you disturb the female too much. And yeah, that's one reason, because it's less work, less animals, and the raising methods are a bit different, I would say. And also the huge diversity in them. Oiscorpiinae is a big subfamily, and I always say the subfamily because there are more genera than Oiscorpius in it. They all were Oiscorpius back in the day, but they got split some time ago, and some subgenera are still subgenera, and some ex-subgenera are now their own genera, and it's a bit confusing, but in total there are around 100 described species of them in Europe. And the cool thing is, as I mentioned a bit before, there's nearly almost every time like every habitat of Southern Europe. The northernmost species, you found them in the Alps. I think you just found the Oiscorpius italicus. Is that right?
Yeah, true. That's what you said.
Yeah, that's actually
we were just scorpion.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the most generalist species. They occur, yeah, in Europe, Northern Africa, and they got, I think, even imported in South America by accident. And they like to live in stone walls, in basements, in, I don't know, everywhere, under stones, in the Alps. They live in Italy, Croatia, in Greek, everywhere. And there are some other Oiscorpiinae, the genus Alpiscorpius. There are, I think, 2 or 3 species in Switzerland, and they are really specialized. They only live in the Alps and in alpine forests, and they are really specialized and really small. And there are some species that only live in caves in Montenegro, or there are other species that can tolerate heat a lot more. And yeah, that's what it makes so interesting. And of course, this picture of a scorpion in the Alps is really cool to me, because I always thought scorpions, when you think of scorpions, you think of the Namib Desert or some tropical rainforest, but not the Alps.
That's definitely true. Yeah, and also when I'm thinking about Oiscorpius, I have very little experiences with invertebrates, I have to say, but when I'm thinking about Oiscorpius, I always have this one very specific look in mind. I don't have the idea that it's a specifically diverse genus or subgenus, as you say, subgenera. So yeah, I'm wondering if we could maybe do a slideshow of pictures of some scorpion species that you are speaking about. I'm not sure, Stefan, if that's something that we want to do or
You're
can
gonna
do.
give me more work, man. No, but I think it's
Yeah,
cool for the viewer to
yeah,
that we
because
add a few for sure.
a little bit difficult to imagine, I feel like.
Yeah, I could send you some right now or
Wunderbar.
later.
Nah, later.
Okay,
Because
perfect.
and let me do a little introduction for another topic because Hannes, once we met in Marbach at this giant
Weinstadt,
invertebrate
Marbach is
expo.
the old one. We met in Weinstadt.
Ah, we met in Weinstadt. Oh, true. Yeah, I was just following along Flo, to be honest. Yeah, so once we met there at this huge invertebrate show, I got to know you a little better, and you told me that you are studying biology, so you're
Yeah.
going for a professional route, and you are currently working on your bachelor thesis. Is that true? And it's
No.
going to be no, but it's going to be about Oiscorpius too, right? You told me something that you were working on a project for Oiscorpius.
Yeah, but that's just that has nothing to do with my university. All my
All right.
quote unquote scientific things I did. I told you that I had the Senckenberg collection of them.
Yeah.
Okay. I identified the Senckenberg collection of Euskorpiine, for those who didn't know, because I had the chance to by a friend, and all that kind of work, and I have some species at home that are undescribed, and I have a really good friend. Shout outs to Mario. He's my age too, and he's the only one I know that's as into Euskorpius as I am, and we both always try to do a bit of science at home, like look at distributions, look at where species occur, if it's a new species or not, and we all write that down, and we are collecting data right now, for example, of the reproduction of the whole subfamily, because there are no good sources about Euskorpiine ecology, and that's a really niche thing, and I think you can only really do it if you have if you already have a degree and are really specialized in arachnology, and then you have to be lucky that you can work on these species. So I really enjoy it, and I just
I'm not
do
sure.
all the scientific stuff with Euskorpiine and scorpions. That's just hobby-wise. That's not my university thing.
Okay. But to be honest, you sent me a paper and it was fucking huge. So I feel like you could make a bachelor thesis out of it. So
The
maybe,
Alpiscorpius thing. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. All right, interesting. Yeah. So I'm now the only guy who is a pure hobbyist in this round here. Stefan, you are a professional kind of in the animal caretaking,
I'm a
and
professional
Hannes,
hobbyist.
a professional hobbyist. Okay, Hannes, you're going for this route too. So I think it's an interesting topic to discuss. What made you take that decision, to take it really serious and to the next level instead of keeping it a hobby, working I want to say a normal job, office job, making some money and, spending it in your free time on your hobby, but you chose to go all in. And I'm wondering if that was a decision that was made very lightly, or if it was a struggle for you to do it or not.
You mean to pick biology as a
Yeah, to study
subject?
biology and to go for a professional route.
To be honest, that's the only job I could imagine since I could think. I always wanted to be like, when I was little, I always said I want to be a forscher, so an animal scientist or something like that. In German, Tierforscher, so animal scientist, I guess. And when I was when I was 10, I wanted to be an entomologist, insect
Entomologist.
entomologist, insect scientist. And when I was 12, I wanted to be an herpetologist, and I always wanted to be a scientist for animals, because I don't know, it's just I just want to know more about animals. I don't know where it comes from or what drives me, but I can't just look at them and think, oh, nice, it's an animal. I want to know everything about it. I want to know how it reproduce, and why it does certain things, and science is the answer.
Interesting. Yeah, so it was never an option for you to run a pet shop or to be a biology teacher or
No, never
no?
teacher. No.
I sometimes think the same, Hannes. So, what is your, how do I say this? With the biology study, is there a certain subject you're focusing on?
Ecology, I would say, because how to explain, in our university, you can, when you have like the base, the base, you can specialize further, and you can go to different parts of this biology segment, and one of them is like evolution and ecology of animals, and that's the part that works with animals. So I'm gonna go in that direction. To be honest, I'm just 21 now, so I think I still have quite some time, and maybe that's one reason why I'm not writing my bachelor thesis right now. Yeah, I think I will still have 1 or 2 semesters until I write my bachelor thesis and specialize. But yeah, I think I will go into the ecology section. And last year I had the chance to work as a field biologist, or as a student job as a field biologist, to help to monitor wild bees, sand lizards, stuff like that. It was really cool project.
Where
And
did you do that?
where or why?
Where?
I don't know if I can mention the name on here, but it was a local firm here in my city in Dortmund.
Okay,
And
okay.
yeah, I knew a guy that works there because of the hobby, and he also was, when he still studied, he was on my university, and his employer, or the guy who invented this firm, he he taught a class in on monitoring animals. It was like an extra class you could take but didn't have to, and I took this class. And yeah, he offered me and a friend who also was really into this monitoring class. Yeah, he offered us like this summer, this student job. And yeah, I really liked it. I could imagine doing that as my full-time profession, because it's something you do for your own environment at home. It's something where you can help to save habitats or to save certain species. But on the other hand, I also want to be this kind of taxonomist, or this more this, yeah, the scientist you have in your head when you think of a scientist, like
That's what
finding new
Peter
stuff.
Jäger does.
Yeah.
All right. So, as a biology student, I can imagine that sometimes people are a little bit worried about the future, or what am I going to do once I graduate and everything. And most likely, it's not very easy to find a well-paying job after. But I have a strong feeling that for you it can be different, because what differentiates you from a lot of people who might get into studying biology is the fact that you are very well connected already. Even though you're still very young, you've got a kind of an interesting network already. And for the name that we just dropped, Peter Jäger, it's an interesting guy, and I would like to give a little bit of a backstory, because I met that guy in Vietnam like 1.5 years ago, just by accident, because there was this arachnological meeting, the global meeting of arachnologists, however you say. Yeah, and so we met each other just randomly, and so we went into a cave and collected some spiders and some centipedes even. And yeah, once I got to know you better, Hannes, you told me that you are really, really friends with him. You can say he kind of adopted you. That's what he said, at least. And
Yes.
yes, so he is the head of arachnology at the Senckenberg Museum in Frankfurt, the most, I would think, a popular museum here in Germany for taxonomy on spiders, I guess.
Yes.
So contact like that, I think it can be super valuable for you in the future, just to get some, you know, internships somewhere or
I already had
gigs.
some cool chances, because it's all started because I had a Herpeto species, and Peter, he's the guy for huntsman spiders. He's, yeah, that's his specialization, and especially this genus. And I had one Herpeto species that was sold under a name, and I looked the pictures up, and I thought, that can't be, that's not the species. And I knew that Peter Jäger described the species, and I, yeah, looked up his email, and I wrote in the email and said, yeah, I keep this species, and I don't think it's what it was sold as. And he said, oh yes, you're right, you can see that because of that and that. And then I asked him, yeah, how do you get from a normal biology student to an arachnologist? And he said, that's too complicated to answer on email, just phone me. And then we phoned each other. I think I was 15, 16 at the time, something around that. And then he said, yeah, if you want to come to my office here in Senckenberg in Frankfurt, yeah, just come next weekend and we can talk and I can show you the collection. And yeah, then we talked, and I think 1 or 2 years later there was the arachnological symposium of Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, and all some of just hobby guys, really known names in the hobby, and some of the science guys were there, and we were at this evening sitting on the roof top of Senckenberg where Peter's office is, and just having a chat and a beer with guys where I read their books when I was younger. That was so cool. And last year I was invited to the Arachnological Congress too, and this time it was more international with other scientists. And yeah, few months before I was I was drinking some beers with Peter, and I was kind of drunk, and he convinced me to have a presentation about Scorpius. He convinced me to hold a presentation about the ecology or something about Scorpius for that scientific publicum. Listeners, and I was pretty nervous, but I did it. It turned out good.
So you gave a talk in front of scientists and experts, I want to say, at
Yeah,
the age of, what was it, 17?
no, I think there was 20 or 19.
Okay.
That's quite cool to hear you're so young.
What did you
and
talk about? I can remember that you told them about something pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, I talked about the ecology of Scorpius and the diversity of this subfamily because yeah, for this generation of the arachnologists, they always knew there were like 10 species, and I just said, yeah, okay, update, it's 90 species now, and they all live in specialized habitats. And yeah, I also had the last slide I had was yeah, things we can learn from keeping them in captivity that we don't learn in the nature. And Mario, the friend I mentioned earlier, and I found out that you can have what's the word called? You can not decide. Yes, of course. Sorry. You can differentiate different species groups or different subgenera from other ones from the color of the offsprings in Insta1. So when the babies are on the back of the mother, they have a certain coloration. And of course, this is not for all of the 90 species. I just know it from some species where I observed it. But you can really differentiate some subgenera and some even species groups by the color of the babies in Insta1. And that's something that was never mentioned before. And that's something Mario and I found out together while keeping and breeding them.
Interesting, man.
so cool.
So you as a teenager, you can really tell the scientists something new.
Yeah, maybe. And the cool thing was everything else was about spiders, and I was the only scorpion guy. And the rest of the weekend, I was just the scorpion guy. And everybody that had questions about scorpions and different topics just talked to me as the scorpion guy. And then, yeah, it was a bit. It was fun, but I don't really like to be in the spotlight so much. So yeah.
Welcome on the podcast. But I do totally now understand that Ben almost assumed or thought you were doing your thesis on the Scorpius, because although you're not doing it for your school, you're basically doing it only from more your hobby point of view. But everything that you're learning probably at school, you're taking away a lot from that and what you're learning in the hobby. So I totally understand that Ben was like, didn't you do it for your school? Because you're basically doing it, just not for your education in this case. Of course, you're learning
Yes.
from it, but that's so cool, man. Do you agree with me, Ben? Maybe that's the reason why.
Yeah, of course. I feel like you are writing a bachelor thesis, but nobody is going to get to see it really. You know, it's a hidden one.
Yeah, maybe I don't. I mean, I don't want to put all effort into it now, and at the end, maybe I can't write about this topic. So
Yeah,
I have some different. Also, I have at least 2 or 3 topics on Euskorpiine where I say, yeah, that could be a bachelor thesis.
yeah.
The most coolest thing would be the description of a new genus, because Mario and I found out that there's one subgenus that's not elevated to genus level yet, and some people said, yeah, maybe we're gonna do it in like a few years or so, but yeah, we found another species from the Peloponnese, southern Greece, that could be one of the evidences that this subgenus should be elevated to genus level, together with other combinations I don't want to mention here right
Of
now,
course.
and that would be
Keep
really
it
cool.
secret. So does it, how do you actually do differentiate one genus from the other? Is there some specific markers that you can go for? Is it morphology? Is it genetic testing? Or how can you
Um,
finally say, yeah, this is a new genus, this is not a subgenus?
Of course, the genetics part, I can't do that at home. I don't live in a lab. So I can just focus on morphology and ecology. Ecology is not really that important when it comes to differentiating species, but morphology is still, in the times of genetic genome sequencing and stuff like that, morphology is really still present in scorpion taxonomy. And especially with Euscorpius, you have to count certain Trichobotria. Trichobotria are sensory hairs. Scorpions have to find prey and just feel. And you have to count the how many there are,
The amount.
and you have to look at the pattern of them at certain body parts, and then you combine this with coloration, with measurements of certain body parts, with the form of the pedipalps. The pedipalps are the pinchers, the claws, and you can combine all these stuff together with genetics, and then you can say, okay, it's a new species, it's a new genus, blah blah
So you
blah.
go by the amount of differences, I want to say. You've got just one or two differences. Maybe it's just another species. You've got
Yeah,
5 differences at the same time. Okay, that could be
yeah,
another
that's the
genus.
big problem is with Euscorpiine. There's a lot of splitting going on in the taxonomy,
Hmm.
and splitting is not the problem, but the criteria of splitting are sometimes a problem, because even in one species, the amount of Trichobotria, it's not staple. It can vary. So with some species, you have like 8 to 10 Trichobotria on that body part, and there's often a lot of overlapping. And I also forgot to mention something. You always have to consider, in my opinion at least, the geographical background or the geographical history. If there was a mountain or a river like a
Ah,
million
okay.
years ago, and that's really important because, for example, spiders, they can balloon. So small baby spiders, they throw up
Abdomen.
their silk in the
Yeah.
air, and they do their silk in the air, and they flow away.
Yeah.
Yes, and scorpions can do that, and they don't really move so
Mhm.
much. So it's always important to see, okay, how did this region where we found this species looked in the last few 10,000 years or million
Mm.
years, and that's also really important. The
Uh,
natural barriers.
And that's something that you do when you're studying the scorpions, also
Yes,
taking a look
also.
at the geography.
Yes, I really got to know every small city in the Balkans when I had to
Mm.
or when I got the chance to identify the scorpions for Senckenberg. It's really funny how this hobby can get you more into geography.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I can imagine that even altitude can be
Yeah, that's
one of the factors.
that's the cool thing with some species too. Recently, some friends of mine went to Greece, and I couldn't come to that trip because I was really sick, unfortunately. But they were at Mount Olympus and Mount Ossa, the
Mm.
two big mountains in Greece. And there are on Mount Olympus, there are 3 species, and they all differentiate in their habitats, because one is higher up in the area where there are no trees, and one is farther down where there are trees, and one is at the bottom where there are forests and stuff. So yeah, that plays a role too. And that this ecological role is, in my opinion, underrepresented in the current taxonomy of nearly all animals, or at least in scorpiology. Nobody really cares for the ecology part. In some new papers, you have a bit of ecology and habitat mentioned, but in the old papers, there's nothing mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm wondering about the genus Varanus. You know, the Varanus genus is so incredibly diverse. You've got tiny species, you've got the huge Komodo dragons and stuff like that. Sometimes to me it feels like Varanus, it should be a whole lot of genuses. What do you think about it, Stefan?
This is a good question. I've never really thought about that, but you're totally correct. They certainly are different. They are divided a bit, right? I mean, you have the Odatria, which are the Australian smaller species. The Acanthurus are part of those, Killany, Glauerti, whatever. And there's the bigger species.
The tree monitors and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But
So-
at the end of the day, it's still
Yeah.
one genus. And I feel like that can't be right.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they have a lot of, I don't know, maybe the biologists will agree with me. They have a lot of morphological and genetical factors that are the same. The skeletal structure, especially the skull, the teeth, the build, the hemipenals. You know, the males have a bit of I don't know if it's at least calcium. You know, in the hemipenes, which a lot of
that's what
lizards
makes it
don't
strong.
have. Yeah, that's why you can check them. Yeah, true.
They are hard 24/7.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, maybe it's just to give some structure because they're so big. So those are a lot of reasons for me to do consider them all in the same genus, and then differentiate on species or clades based on geographical ranges and sizes, or maybe even ecology, again, like the tree monitors and I don't know. Does that sound logical to you, our biologist friend?
Yes, I think so. I'm no expert with varanids, but I totally agree with you, Stefan, because you can't compare taxonomy of invertebrates and reptiles, for example. You have to look what I immediately had the skull in mind, as you said. They all have the same kind of morphology, and also I don't know, is the African savanna monitor, is it two Varanus or is it a different genus?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, it's two Varanus, but maybe I thought because of their distribution, because I think when you look at Australia and Asia and all these small islands, you can kind of track them back to one point, I'm sure, and that's where genetics come in mind. So I think it has a reason why they are still the same genus. But I also wonder all the time, with reptiles you always get subspecies, with invertebrates you always get new species. That's different too, but yeah, that's science. I mean, there is no one that controls over all taxonomy lineages. It's just one scientist says that and another one have a different opinion, and the one with the most credits and connections, he gets to write the paper and publish it. So yeah,
I can imagine that maybe I don't know, I really have no idea, but of course, if somebody makes a taxonomic discovery, they often get a little bit of either a grant or some money to do further investigation for the university they are connected to. And I can imagine that external investors or whatever are more invested in the species that make an impact than maybe that small animal, at least when there's no like environmental or maybe usable, like I don't know, is there any like scorpion venom used for medicine or for antibiotics?
I have heard they are
yes.
smoking it to get high.
Of course you did.
Is that true?
Yeah, Yeah, I can imagine that Ben learned this on his trips in Vietnam, maybe. But yes, in fact, there are some scorpion venoms that are used. For example, Heteroctenus junczeus. That's a classic, hobby classic, I'd say. The Cuban red scorpion or something like that, and its venom is used to in research of breast cancer because some parts of the venom can destroy the cancer cells. But um, sorry, but there are, yeah, it's a different topic because difficult topic because some years ago I think there was this the news about heloderma venom against diabetes or something like that, and the pharma industry in America just put it down. And I think sometimes the same stuff happens with scorpions. There are a lot of scorpion farms now in the Middle East because the people heard that scorpion venom is one of the most expensive fluids in the world, but you only really need really less of it. And there are like in Saudi Arabia and other countries, there are people collecting hundreds of Androctonus and other scorpions to sell the venom, but it's just money scam.
I've seen some clips about, as you said, scorpion farms. I think what I've seen, it was huge piles of egg crates or some
Yeah,
levels of.
that's for eating them in China.
Ah, okay, because it was thousands. It was like a, I don't want to say a communal setup, but at the end of the day, it was a huge group, of hundreds and countless amounts of scorpions. And I was wondering what they're doing with it.
I think these big farms are for frying them or put them in candy or something like that in China and Thailand.
And further on from that thought, I'm thinking, do you think scorpions in general could be a significant feeder? I don't want to say feeder insect, a feeder animal,
Animal.
because it can be an interesting addition to the diets of some animals, right?
Yeah, I talked about this with Flo a few days ago too, and I think with arachnids they would really be good feeders because in the wild many insectivore, or as we say insectivore, we should really say invertebrate animals eat a lot of arachnids. They always, spiders
Yeah.
get eaten by everything, and nobody really feeds spiders because you have to really put energy and time into raising them. For example, if you have varanids or lizards that are bigger than this, they want to eat a spider that's at least, I would say, this big. And you to get a spider to that size, you either really have to put a big setup up, like big communals like Andre Leeds did. He put up this rain, or sorry, I just lost track here. There was one guy who just found a method to raise spiders communally in big tubs, like, how do you call it, Regentonne, rain collectible thing. Put it full with cork and put one egg sac in, and after a year you can pick up the adults. That could maybe work, but
Which
who in the
species was it?
he
Spider.
did it with everything. He did it with
Oh,
Phoneutria, like the wandering spiders. He did it with different
Heteropoda too?
Tetrapoda, Holconia, stuff like that.
Oh,
Andre Leeds,
yeah.
he really was the goat of true spiders, but he had a car accident, unfortunately, a few years ago. But different topic.
Oh, damn. So that's always something that I'm wondering about, keeping communal setups of arachnids, scorpions as well as spiders. So do you think it's a matter of space? If you just provide them enough space, maybe a square meter or even more, they can get along with each other, and of course enough food items? Or are there any species that are especially well adapted to be kept in a communal setup?
Yeah, of course, there are some species like with scorpions, the genus Titius, and especially Titius stigmurus. It's a parthenogenic scorpion species, and you can keep them really in a big amount of them together. They don't really eat each other. Sometimes they do, but they reproduce a lot quicker. And you could, yeah, these would work well as feeding scorpions.
Aren't they
If you-
super venomous, the Titius?
Yes, but if you don't provoke them.
Okay.
Yeah, they
I
can't.
always think if you get poked by a scorpion, it's definitely your own fault.
Yes,
Yeah, but the animal,
definitely.
true, you know.
Yeah, of course, if you're gonna feed it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe we should try with Flus enialoides. They come from South America too, right? So it's
Yeah.
pretty.
I mean, for me as a scorpion
For
keeper,
science.
it's kind of hard, but you could, I guess, you could amputate the telson,
Stinger.
or just amputate just
Yeah.
squishes with. But yeah, for me as an arachnid enthusiast, that's
Yeah,
kind of
pretty
cruel.
hard.
So
Of
Yeah,
course, it's
that's
still an
true.
animal.
It's true.
yes, still an animal. But to get back to your feeder question, or the communal question in general, I learned that raising scorpion, spiders, whatsoever, the best thing is to leave them with their siblings the first few days or weeks, or even months, depending on the setup. So they can, as hard as it sounds, the weak ones get eaten. Everything okay with the
It's
connection? Okay, sorry. The weak ones get eaten, and the bigger ones survive, and they grow faster. But after a while, depending on the species and the setup, you have to separate them, because otherwise there will be only one or two left, and that's why it's not really efficient to use them as feeders, because they take a longer time to mature than crickets or roaches or something, and B, you need more space to do it.
And you need feeder
You
insects to
can do it with
feed
some
your
species.
feeders. True.
Yes, even that. And with spiders, there are some communal ones, like the Monocentropus balfouri. Everyone says that's a communal tarantula, but nobody really found communals of them in the wild. They just tolerate each other really good and don't eat each other, but they are not really living in a communal or something like that. With scorpions, it's a lot easier, and there are a lot more species that live like this actually in the wild, or at least under the same stones, same rock. But with spiders, there are only really these Stegodyphus domicola I had in Weinstadt. These are the social spiders, social velvet spiders from South Africa. They live in big nests in the nature, and the nest can be over hundreds of meters and thousands of spiders in it, and they really act together. The females sometimes do matrophagy, so they die and the babies can feed on them. And sometimes even not the exactly mother spider of this one exact does it, but some other female in this communal. And
sacrifices itself.
Yes, and these really do live in a colony.
Crazy.
And kind of, not social, but communal. But I'd say the majority of arachnids should be kept alone.
What about heteropoda? Sorry, just one question. Is there any chance to keep a heteropoda species in a communal setup?
I always raised them communally, because that's the best method for healthy offspring. If you separate them directly, they die. The majority of them dies when you separate them directly, and they are weaker. I don't know why that is, but it is like that. But if you have them in groups, and after one or two mold stages, so when they are not in the first mold anymore, when you separate them, then you have a bit less of them, and then they are stronger and healthier. So not all the time, but at the start, it's really beneficial to raise them in groups.
I get it. Stefan, you wanted to ask something? I have a follow-up question, but
Oh yeah. I just it was, I think, important indeed to mention maybe that there's a difference between really communal, like working together and looking for each other, and tolerating each other, or not being or being full enough not to eat the other one. Maybe that's also the case. A lot of territorial drift or territorial needs disappear in animals as long as there's plenty of food or plenty of mates or plenty of hides. And as soon as one of those things disappears, it all implodes. And I think that's
Exactly.
yeah. So that's why I thought it was pretty cool for you to mention also that there was a clear difference, and there are actually not a lot of species who are really communal. But it was really interesting to hear about the ones that were.
Yeah, yes, they are cool. I had them. I don't have them anymore, because they started doing well for the first year I had them, and after I saw the males always matured, and I saw some pairings but never had eggs, and then out of the sudden, when all the males were dead, the whole colony started to drop, and the animals were just I don't know why, but they didn't eat as much and as good as before, and they just started to. I think because they only live 2 years in total, and I did something wrong because they didn't reproduce. So the cycle didn't start new, and then the whole colony collapsed, and I only had like 20 left, and they gave them away to people that are maybe more experienced with these kind of spiders and can maybe reproduce them again.
Yeah, so why I'm asking about the communal Heteropoda, because I really like the Heteropoda species in general. Where, they are moving across the walls or caves so quickly. It's just fascinating. And can you still hear me?
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was
Okay.
like mimicking the movement. That's
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, and here in the back you can see this picture frame style plant potted on my wall. And I was thinking about building something like this, pretty similar to it, but a lot bigger, maybe 1 or 2 square meters in size, and have a bridge or a brim of glass, maybe 15, 20 centimeters all the way around, and a water area in the bottom, and a huge rock display, free hanging on the wall. And I was thinking about keeping some spiders on there. First, I got this idea because of whip spiders, the Damon diadema, or what's this other species too with this very slim fangs? I'm not sure. But
Heterofrynus and Frynus. Yeah, sorry.
yeah. And there are a lot of very interesting whip spiders that can be kept in groups, and I think it could really work to keep them on a open front setup like that, free hanging on the wall. But Heteropoda, they really got me too, and the Heteropoda maxima, that's some really special animal. And I know that this scientist Peter Jäger, is he the guy who described them in Laos? Yeah.
Yes, he found them and he described them.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So that can be also a very cool story, but I guess for a Heteropoda maxima, that will only be one specimen then, right?
I think yes, and I think the problem will be that for the whip spiders, for the Amphipugi, you won't really see them other than at night, because they really like it dark. They really don't like any light, and if it's glass in the day, you have just like this this plain rock set up and don't see anything in it. And but it would for sure be cool, I think. But I think if you like Heteropoda, I mean, you have a special connection to the Maxima, I think, because you went in the caves in them. But I really more like the beautiful species like Lunula, the colorful species, or David Bowie, because you can also keep them really good in a planted tank, because they are more from the foresty, jungly areas, and these are a lot cooler, I think, when the thicker bodied Heteropoda. I don't really like the slim ones. They are always brown and live in caves, but the thicker bodied ones, they hang under the leaves. Also, really cool genus is Gnatopalustis. It looks like an Heteropoda maybe for someone who's not really into them, and they have a face like teddy bears. They really look cool and cute as huntsman spiders, and I had them a few years ago.
How do I spell that? I'm sorry. I want to Google it.
Gnatopalustis, and Gnato with TH. So GNATHOP.
I got them.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yeah, there are a lot of huntsman spiders that you don't have on the radar as a normal keeper, because they only get imported as bycatch or from time to time. But there are a lot of cool and beautiful huntsman spiders, yeah. And I
Are they
really
being kept sustainably in the hobby and bred?
Gnatopalystes, no. At least I don't know someone who keeps or breeds them constantly. I know they just come in from time to time, and the problem is that's one big issue in the invertebrate hobby in general, I think. Often stuff that comes in new is traded like people just want to buy it because it's new, and then they can say, oh, I have this species XYZ that is newly described, or it's just a new color form or something like that, and they want to collect it, and they only have one of the species, and then maybe someone who wants to work with them doesn't have the chance to buy enough breeding pairs or enough specimens because they all got sold separately as individual pets, and I don't really see the sense of that. I mean, when you import a new species, it's much more beneficial to try to breed them first or give them to friends from who you know of that they will put the effort in. But I don't see the point of just keeping a wild caught spider because it is really cool and then let it die. I mean, of course, I'm guilty. I did that too back in the day, but nowadays I don't really see the point of that.
That's exactly what I was speaking about in the intro, Stefan, of your one-on-one. You know, people who like to get into one challenge or one project, very excited about it, post a picture about it on Instagram, get some likes, and then, well, yeah, it died, had some parasites. I don't know, if it was an old animal probably. And then if, you know, the passion just dies off again. And I really agree with what you just said, Hannes. Newly imported species or very uncommon species, they should really be kept by specialists who put a lot of effort into breeding them. And once they are really sustainably represented in the hobby, then the, you know, true hobbyist, they just want to consume an animal kind of, they are allowed to get in with captive bred, and that's okay then, I feel like. Yeah.
Is there a difference with like the invertebrate hobby? Because it's a little bit connected to what Ben said. With the reptile hobby, there are these like big importers who import a lot of animals, often the same species, and they are consumed, as Ben so eloquently put it. Is this the same with invertebrates, or are there more like hobbyists like you or like Peter who have heard or found via, you know, the networks a certain species they are interested in or they are looking for, and who are more like privately importing a group to hopefully establish in the hobby? Do you have the same big importers, or is it more like enthusiasts just going the extra mile?
We have both. Definitely, a big part is the big importers, but that's more for the, I would call it the pet trade. And for example, these online shops, or there are a lot of reptile businesses that also sell scorpions and tarantulas. Not really the ones I'm interested in, but they have like the Asian forest scorpion heterometros. They don't even know what species, but they bought 100 of them for €3 a piece from the big importer. And there are certain species that really get raided, I would say. We had this with the Pandinus imperator, the emperor scorpion. I can remember when I was a kid, you could buy them in every pet shop in Germany for like €15 or something like that. And they got collected so much in Western Africa that they nearly not went extinct, but they really declined. And now they are thankfully and not thankfully they are fortunately protected. And one pair costs €150, and you couldn't imagine that back in the day. And this is the same case with all the Asian heterometros. This is the same case with many Asian tarantulas too, that just gets collected and collected and collected, and people buy them as pets, and the middleman makes the money out of it. And we have these kind of imports, but they are only restricted to a few species and a few genera. But there are also, of course, the really investigated hobby people that have the connections to get some rarer stuff and not collect like a few thousands in buckets and stuff, but they maybe get like 15 pairs or something like that. That's more rightfully. And we have another big problem in the invertebrate hobby. That's not another one, but the old problem. It's like collectible Pokemon cards with tarantulas, for example. There are certain names in the hobby that import and breed the new stuff, and it doesn't matter what the tarantula looks. It's just another brown, small, boring looking spider from South America. But the one guy that always has the new stuff sells it and calls it spec, some Spanish name of origin here, and says, new species in the hobby. And the people buy it. It doesn't matter what it costs. It's sold out after 10 minutes. So I think that's another problem too, that people always want the new stuff because tarantulas don't move so much. And you say, okay, I just have 5 boxes here. I could put up another 5 boxes and get some more. And there's this new species and this new species. And with invertebrates, there are tons of new species. And it's really endless. And it's always this, people only want to get the new stuff in and work with the newest and the rarest stuff. And of course, if you make a trade out of it and you want to make some money, of course I can understand it's more beneficial if people know you as the guy who always keeps the rare stuff or always has the new stuff. But at the end, they just get bought. If you have an expensive tarantula species where one sling freshly hatched this big costs 200 euros or more, people won't buy 10 of these and start a breeding group. People will buy one and keep it a single animal. And if you're lucky, people that have a male and a female will get together in 2 years and breed their pair, but that's not the case so often, or the animal dies, and money is wasted by the person who buys it, and animals are wasted by people who don't put the word in. And that's the problem I have with the current invertebrate hobby.
I think it's not such a big thing in the reptile hobby. A lot of new species coming in all the time. I don't feel like that's a thing so much, but it's also playing a role, I feel like. And I think keeping wild caught imported animals just for the fun of it, it's just not right to do. I think it was a lot more common even back in the day. Today, probably still a lot of people do it, especially since wild caught animals are oftentimes sold more cheaply or than captive bred ones. But I feel like there should be some information out there about the right way of doing it, and that's going for captive bred if you're not super invested and you want to try to establish a new species. Yeah. The cost of imported animals should be higher, I feel like.
Yeah, sometimes. I have a question for you guys. Before we started recording, or in general, you as reptile or as maybe mammal enthusiasts who worked with a lot of other setups, other bigger species and stuff like that, do you look at the invertebrate hobby as like being the easier, like the kids version of the reptile hobby, for example, or do you see it equally?
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. I have a whole lot of respect for the people who are invested into the invertebrate hobby. I think it is a huge hobby, and I was surprised when I was at this expo that was specialized in invertebrates, how huge the diversity is and how huge also the scene is. So I think there are a lot of people who take the easy way of getting into the hobby by just buying a little glass setup for 20 euros and a I don't know, a scorpion for 10 and some sand and some cork, and there you go. And that's totally fine too, in my opinion. But I have a whole lot of respect for the people who get really into I want to say the science of the animals, and that's something that you do, Hannes, and I have, as I said, a lot of respect for it because to me it is a a lot more diverse niche than, for example, reptile or definitely mammal keeping. In the mammal scene, there is a limited amount of species that you can actually work with. Yeah. And for invertebrates, I feel like it's a black hole. Yeah. And so I don't at all feel like it's the easy way. No. The setups are more easy, yeah. And probably it's more financially speaking, it's more easy to handle everything. But also you can more easily build a huge collection and also the breeding part and everything. I feel like you have to be very sensitive about what you're doing. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
I partly definitely agree with what Ben just said. I sometimes wonder because when we are talking about herpetoculture, then invertebrates are often like included without much thought. But sometimes I feel like what only, and I do this between brackets because I don't mean it may, but what connects us most is the techniques and materials we use. But I think you undermine the great differences there are between these niches or these groups of animals when it comes to their care and to the approach and the investment of time because I see a lot of I have some friends who breed the jumping spiders, very popular with many reasons. I think Lucas the spider was one of the great reasons for that. I don't know if you know the series.
Yes, yes.
But if I see how much time she puts in there, I'm like amazed. Like there's so much effort that goes into it. I do feel like I see a lot of people in the invertebrate hobby come and go because they get burned out, because they get into the hobby and there's so much, as Ben said, there's like this endless void of incredible species that they keep buying, and then they are sitting there for hours with the ache in their back on the floor, and they're like, man, this is way too much.
And
Um,
also, oh, sorry.
yeah, and
Yeah.
maybe as a finisher. So I think you're definitely not like the that's just on the side that's connected. I think you undermine how big it is and how different it can be by just putting it all under one blanket. And and what I wanted to say is that fuck, I forgot it. It was such a nice one. Okay, Ben, go ahead. Maybe I remember.
Yeah, what I think is also a reason for people getting burned out in the invert hobby more easily is the fact that the animals are just more sensitive. I think especially for humidity, you have to really figure it out very well because, as you said, Hannes, sometimes even one day that you wait for with watering, it can
Yeah.
kill your whole clutch. And for reptiles, I feel like it's not really a thing, you know?
Yeah, and
They're just more durable.
yeah, and that's thank you, Ben, for reminding me. That's similar to what I thought. I thought to myself, like, what you're saying is they are so incredibly sensitive. A lot of species. That's why I stopped keeping centipedes because there was a lot of import. Typical species, they died soon. I thought it was a waste. So that's why I'm about to cut red now. But I think they are often represented as an easy to care for animal. Like you don't may a lot of people I know keep their Pusiloteria, whatever, in their living room without any heat. Again, the gelatine terrarium,
No
cork
light.
bark, and that's it. And I think they are so much more sensitive and so much more complex than what as they are represented or marketed almost. Yeah, so again, I think it's undermined almost more than it should.
It's maybe because the setups are so bare and so they're
Yeah,
just simple,
yeah.
but you have to do it just right, you
There's
know?
no
And I think,
margin for error.
yeah, and I think once you really figure out what the animal really needs, and Hannes, you spoke about it when you were talking about your science background. You really try to understand the animal and really understand where it comes from and what it actually needs and so on. once you really figure that out, I think you can work with a very basic setup.
Yeah.
But if you just get a cricket box, put some cork, so some cocoa humus inside and a little bit of cork bark, and you just keep it dry, whatever, your animals will just dry out and just die very quickly, probably.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Thank you for your good answers. Oh, Stefan, sorry.
No, I just wondered for you, do you think that a lot of invertebrates are just dying very slowly?
Um,
Like because they are kept in subpar and they are they decline, but it not always is as obvious as with like with a mammal for Ben, within a day or two you can see they are dehydrated.
yeah, I think yeah, as you say, you can't really see any I mean you can after a while, but you can't really see any emotion, or not
Mhm.
emotion. You can't really see what the animal is needing, as in vertebrates, like in lizards or in mammals or so. You can kind of, I mean, with lizards, I feel, for example, you can kind of see if a lizard is lacking something. I mean, they are quite hardy, of course, but you can more easily see if something is wrong with them. And with invertebrates, it's much harder to see, and it really takes a while to learn what certain families of invertebrates or genera, yeah, what they do to express some issues. And with some, and the invertebrates are sometimes really hardy, and mainly the species we got in the trade, for example, the tarantulas from South America that got imported in the 90s, the classic rose hair tarantulas from Chile and stuff like that. They live in areas that are, yeah, plain grasslands, and the temperatures are cold in the winter, hot in the summer, and they can live up, the females, up to 30 years, and yeah, they don't die so easily. And that, when the invertebrate hobby was in its kids' shoes, so thousands, this type of mindset got projected on many other species, I think, because back in the day, the more easier and hardy species, they survived the imports and they survived the setups people built for them back in the day. And that kind of mindset and that kind of easy pet you mentioned earlier, people say, yeah, get a tarantula, it's, you don't have to feed it basically and just have it sitting there, but you get a whole lot of more out of the animal if you keep them, yeah, in a
In a
fitting
good way.
environment.
And also the breeding, I feel probably is
Yes, the
only
breed,
gonna be
that's a big
successful
thing too.
then.
People often say, I heard it so often that, yeah, species this or that doesn't work. Yeah, it's not for the hobby. It just doesn't work, and they just treated it like the same other 20 species they breed. So I think I know some old school tarantula guys, old school because they did it already 40 years ago, and they yeah, they told tricks like simulate a rain and dry period, or in you have to change like winter and summer for them, or stuff like that. And yeah, even things that are basic, I have the feeling that are the basics in reptile breeding, these are lacking in invertebrate breeding. So I think, or at least the people I got to know over the hobby with, the people they breed reptiles, they are, yeah, they kind of know how they reproduce in the wild, and it's just making sense to simulate seasons and stuff like that and have them in hibernation and so. But with invertebrates, many people
I have a
many people don't
theory.
think about it. Yeah, what's your theory?
Yeah, I have a theory that first of all, the cages itself or the enclosures itself, they are very tiny, that the ones you use for invertebrates, so it's difficult to really simulate a good climate with different temperature zones, different zones of humidity. When you're talking about rain simulation, how do you really want to do that in such a tiny setup? So you're mostly, I think, having a big shelf of 100 or so boxes. And it's you try to have the right climate in the room, maybe the right temperature, and you try to go with a specific watering cycle. But this true habitat specific simulation is probably a big challenge in tiny setups. And also, I think the collections of a lot of keepers of invertebrates are so diverse in terms of the origins of the animals, so that it is not really possible to make a simulation of one specific climate zone in your room like you do, for example, Stefan. So you've got a whole lot of different dry, moist, high and low temperature animals that you are keeping in one shelf, and maybe the ones who need a little bit of a higher temperature on top and the ones who need a little bit of a lower temperature on the bottom. But this being nerdy about building a habitat, maybe that's not something that is very common in the invert hobby. And we can see that more and more in the reptile hobby, people who are building the habitat first and then putting the animal inside. Yeah. And that's
I
maybe a
also want to
difference.
say at this
Yeah.
point, it's completely okay in my opinion if you don't have setups like you all do for just one scorpion or one spider. Of course, you won't do
Yeah.
like wind or rain simulation in, like, if you have one tarantula and you have a nice planted tank from with, let's say you have a species from Southeast Asia and you have some Southeast Asia plants that are maybe not exactly from the habitat, the tarantula won't care if their plants are exactly from its habitat and stuff like this. But I think people just should do a bit more research where the animal is from. And you, of course, don't need to have a whole room with exact temperatures and air movement and stuff like that for breeding it. But I think the thought is important to know where the animal is
Yeah,
from
true.
and from what kind of microclimate, like more humid, not so humid, humid with plants,
Yeah.
humid without plants. You know what I mean? Just wanted to say that that
Micro,
people don't think,
sorry.
oh, it's that people get scared away from keeping invertebrates. It sounds like everybody is doing everything wrong, but there's a lot of great stuff happening here. Just wanted to say that.
Of course. I think microclimate is a very good word because that's also what I learned when we found the Euscopius. They are not really found everywhere. You need
Yeah.
really to know what you're looking for, and then you can find the animals at that spot. Yeah, and not it's not like, okay, my animals come from Greece. Okay, I will check what's the weather like in Greece, so I will just do
Yeah.
that. It's not as simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked what you said with the just that the thought is there and the understanding that it's a separate being that's in a certain microclimate or whatever, and that you at least understand that microclimate. But I can definitely understand that it's that's not, people are not buying big exoterras with bioactive substrate. And although I do feel like slowly more people are building similar to what you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
Bit thicker substrate, bit more, not one cork tube, but a few, so we can choose maybe some plants that are easily grown, like the Billionia you got now, that's a great plant to add for a setup like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like I see that more and more, so that's cool.
So if the people want to get know more about inverts, they can follow you along on your podcast. Is that true, Hannes? The Atro
Uh,
podcast? It's in
yes,
German, right?
at least for the German audience. Yeah, there's one single English episode, because I thought, yeah, maybe there are some more people interested in invert podcast, but that episode was recorded 2 years ago without any plans, just by myself. So yeah, I don't know if it's worth listening. It's just a trip report from Crete, what I found there and what I looked for. But yes, for the German audience, I have a podcast about, mainly about inverts, but I also talk about the general hobby stuff. For example, I recorded an episode with Florian last week, I think, and we just talked about the same things we talk about here, like the hobby in general, what our goals are, or what we think of certain topics. discussed feeders, for example. I started a new subdivision of the podcast that's called Oiscorpiine Deep Dive, because as you know, when you listen to this point of this podcast, I'm really into these small European scorpions, and that's what I'm really passionate about. And together with my friend Mario, we want to bring more information about them out there for the people who are interested. It will be in German, because I think when you are both German speaking, it's kind of a bit weird if you talk in English, if there's nobody else who is talking another language. But and it's just easier. I feel more comfortable talking in German. That's why, unfortunately, it's just in German. But I was really lazy. We already talked about this before we started recording. I was really lazy for a few months and didn't record anything. But now I think I have a better plan to be back. So now I plan to upload one Oiscorpiine deep dive episode, one normal episode, one Oiscorpius, one normal, and then let's see how we continue. And also I have met a lot of new and interesting people, and also friends over the last years that are also more potential guests. When I started it, I wasn't I didn't feel secure enough to ask people, do you want to be on my podcast, where like 10 people listen to it. And now I got some cool feedback over the last years from people I didn't even know before, and that really sparked my joy in it.
Perfect. What's your schedule? How many episodes do you release or want to?
Didn't plan on that. I know that's a Ben kind of question. Always planning the future. Because it started out of fun and for myself. I didn't really made a schedule, but I think every 2 weeks is manageable. Every week would be better, but I know myself, and I know that when something comes in between every 2 weeks, it could be easily done, because that I don't have the pressure. And when I have this pressure to put out an episode every week, maybe the quality drops, or I don't know. I don't really like to work under pressure for something that I voluntarily do and decided myself on. So I would say every 2 weeks. If I have a good run, maybe every week. I don't know. There are some cool guests and some episodes in the making, and some recorded. So I just have to get better at the technical stuff. I'm like a grandpa. I can't do anything with technique. I don't have a microphone. I mean, I have
But
a
you're on
microphone.
Spotify already.
Yeah,
that's something.
Yeah, the app told me how to do it, but I mean, I have a microphone, but this microphone, it needs a certain kind of software, and I can't put it on. And and with editing is really complete. It's not my thing too. I have to look more into that, because then it's easier to listen to. I was lucky enough, every episode with guests until now went so smoothly that I just could record the thing and upload it straight without editing. But I think the audience is getting bigger, and I think it might be a good idea to step up the quality too, because when I look at your podcast and all the other ones I listen to, the quality standard is really high, and I have the feeling that I have to step up the game a little bit.
Yeah, but it also has maybe to do with just how we work. Like, we are like, I know that over the last episodes, I thought they were great, but there was so much that that's why I'm constantly looking at the screen, like what's happening, whatever. I'm just so anal almost about it. But it does sound like a healthy way for you to approach it, not to have it like become like a burden on yourself with something that was supposed to be just fun and educational and to help you expand. I think that's a very healthy way to approach it.
And
And
you're
I
still
remember we talked to Dylan, and I asked the same question about like Dylan for the Animals at Home podcast, and we talked about consistency, and he was like, yeah, consistency is important, especially in the beginning if you want to build something. but I use that word a lot. It's more important for your audience to know that there's going to be another episode, and if that's going to be in 2 weeks, that's also okay. As long as they can count on you being there, and if that's once a week, once every 2 weeks, that's okay. And for me, that really helps to let go of the pressure that I put on myself to keep.
And also I think in the worst case you had a really nice conversation with some friends or new people you didn't know before. So just do it. So it's I'm really hyped for this, because I think it's this whole presentation of you guys, because I remember when I first heard each one of the Greenhouse Boys and Project Herpetoculture, and then some other podcasts, and of course everybody knows Terrarium channel. So that's a really cool, you have a cool ground base to do it. And I think many of the people who will listen to your podcast will be listeners from the Project Herpetoculture or Animals at Home network. And that's why I think the fan base will be really chill and not pressuring, at least from my opinion. So I mean, you guys, you don't do it as a job. You still have a real job and friends and family. So I think it's just really appreciable, if that's a word, that you guys take your free time and do something like that with all the editing and the technical stuff. So besides the projects you are doing, that's couldn't wish for more.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's see that we can keep it going for a while. Yeah. But I'm pretty positive about it.
Me too. I'm really looking forward.
You know what?
I'm really looking forward to see the responses of our guest episodes, and also this one. I thought this was a really interesting one. So you've basically also talked to Flo, one of our other hosts, on your podcast, also about a bit the European herpetoculture, I believe, or just.
Yes, we talked about comparing the invert and the reptile hobby a bit. And we talked feeders. I think for half an hour we just talked about feeders and what we could do more, and what species to use and not to use, and the same stuff. For example, we talked about with the why scorpions and arachnids are not as easy to use as feeders and stuff like that. And we also compared a bit of the I would say this in quotes, American style keeping to the keeping we are used to here in Europe.
Okay, so maybe that's, Ben, I don't know if you agree, but maybe then it's just cool for everybody who really wants to get into that, to just point everybody to that episode. And maybe just to finish this episode with like a last question, maybe to summarize it. We started this podcast because European herpetoculture was sometimes talked about as a separate entity, almost the same as sometimes invertebrate hobby can be. And we wondered if this was legit. Is that the correct word? If this was indeed a correct assumption, or is there something else? Either way, do you think there's an obvious difference between European and other herpetocultures? And if so, what to you defines European herpetoculture? So what makes it?
So I really just want to speak about inverts here, because I mean, I have reptile experience, but not as you, for example. I just have my pet geckos that I mean, I have them for over a decade now, but these are just my pets. I'm not really into the big reptile hobby. But with inverts, I think there's a even bigger difference. Here in Europe, it's always kind of, we want to get the new stuff and breed and breed and breed. Everybody breeds like crazy in the spider hobby in Europe. That's like, I have the feeling you can't really be in the, or it's often viewed so that you can't really be a good spider enthusiast if you don't breed anything. That's not really true, I think. But here in Europe, everything is on breeding, and many people trade. So I got to know so many new friends in my life because I just traded spiders and talked to each other, and I don't know, traded something for this and that, and the money is not the thing. And in the US hobby, at least what I see online and what I know from people I spoke to, it's much more in this market mindsetting. People want to buy a full enclosure kit with substrate and a fake plant and the spider together, and they want a care sheet coming with it. And it's in the US hobby with spiders. It's more like a pet hobby because breeding is gate kept a bit. People say, yeah, I got these from. I don't want to drop names here. I got these from importer XYZ or from this big breeder or this big store. And they are also a lot more expensive than here in Europe. Sometimes double or triple the price we pay here. And I can understand why people only buy one spider then and don't have enough for a breeding stock. But I have the feeling that the whole breeding thing is a bit gate kept in the US. It's not witchcraft. It's not so easy if you do a bit of research and you have enough time and space. You can do it. And yeah, I have the feeling in the US that the people are more into this market mindset that they don't really trade with each other. I mean, it's difficult because you have different states, you have different laws, and it's, for example, here in Europe, I can easily ship invertebrates from Germany to France or to Spain or backwise, and
Just by post?
yes, that's legal. Yeah, invertebrates is legal. I want to mention that here.
Okay.
If you do it right. But I think in America it's really different because every state got its own laws, and you can't, for example, they had a big thing with Poecilotheria. You can't legally sell or ship or I don't know what Poecilotheria or other genera over state borders, and yeah, that's another problem. But
It's probably because they are on CITES now, right? There are few Poecilotheria species on CITES now.
yes, and the Americans have this thing going on, something with ARC. I don't know. Many species got banned.
US ARC or something like that.
Yeah.
No, that's the
I think it
representative
had
of the
something to
hobby.
do with that, but I
Okay.
don't know.
Is it about invasive species?
Sometimes too, yeah, they want to make a white list or something. I don't know. But another big issue Flo and I said was this. There are many the big keepers. They are often YouTubers or people who have a YouTube channel or Instagram or something like that, and people view them as the experts or so because they have a big outreach and a big collection. But those people don't even breed, or they really just buy the spiders from importers. And sometimes people get elevated on a level because they have certain species, and people say, oh, he keeps this rare species, but he just had the money to buy it. And as stupid,
and uses the YouTube to get more money to buy
yes,
more interesting species, a lot of
and the
unboxings.
complete opposite of this is the Asian hobby, because the Asian hobby, it's just some really guys you don't know the face of behind their accounts, but they breed everything. They breed the stuff that we had imported like 5 years ago, and nobody here managed to captive breed them. And they have setups that look like sterile cups and nothing really in it, but it somehow works. And that's a crazy opposite. The Asian, or at least parts of the Asian hobby, I see from Korea and from what's the Malaysia and countries of Southeast Asia. Yeah, they I don't know how they do it, but they have the tricks somehow. They breed they are more focused on breeding the rare species and get a big breeding stock and distribute them in the hobby. And I think also there's this prestige thing of being the one who breeds the rare species. I follow one guy on Instagram, and he has a private account, but he breeds one Scolopendra hardwicki, and he is the man. He boxes a room full of just this species, and he's like the big guy for. And I think is the focus in America. Having a diverse collection is the focus, and Europe is, I don't know, kind of the middle thing.
I'm really interested in one more question. It's about the difference of the European invert culture and elsewhere. Is there a huge difference in availability of species, especially when we're speaking about the Asian market? Do they have a lot of species available that you've never seen in real life, maybe, or what is it like?
Yes, I think the European market is the one with the biggest availability. In the US, they only buy from Asian and European imports, and not everyone, of course, but most of the time. And the Asians, they are always really interested in stuff that we breed, and we are always really interested in stuff that the Asians breed, but these are different kind of animals. The Asian hobby is really, they like the rare stuff, the niche stuff, the
weird stuff,
boring
maybe.
scorpions of South Africa.
Okay.
But yeah, the availability in Europe is really great. I think because of laws how to import something, and because all the countries are sitting so close together and are united by the EU, it's really cool feeling. I don't know why it's just like this, in my opinion.
Interesting. I understand.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hannes, for joining us. It was all very interesting, and there's still so many topics I would like to talk about, but I guess that's the reason we started the podcast, right, Ben?
Definitely.
Yeah, there's always questions unanswered, but I really enjoyed this one. So thank you so much for joining us. We already talked about the podcast, so maybe it's a cool idea that you share how people can find your podcast and maybe your page, and then we will wrap up the episode.
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you for having me. I hope the internet connection still survives the last few minutes because Stefan is frozen again, but Ben is
It's
not.
fine.
So okay, Stefan is there back. My Instagram is der_Spinner. It's a German play of words, but I think you can link it down in the episode files. And my podcast is named Arthro Podcast, like a play of words between arthropod and podcast. If you have any questions about inverts or Scorpios, I don't know, regarding whatever, feel free to shoot me a message. And thank you for having me again.
Perfect. Very,
you so
very cool.
much.
And I'm sure we're gonna have you again in a while when you're talking about your bachelor thesis.
Okay. For the
cool.
listeners, thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this one. Next week is going to be a roundtable where all the hosts will be present to share our thoughts on the start of this podcast and also what we took away from these last episodes. So what we learned from people like Hannes. And I hope to see you then too. And thank you so much. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Buzz.